Commander Elena Reyes adjusted her dress uniform, the movement causing a brief twinge where titanium vertebrae met the organic portions of her spine. The former ultra-marathon runner hadn't let a military accident end her career. Instead, she'd become Earth's first diplomatic representative to the Galactic Conclave, carrying humanity's hopes into the stars. "Ready, Commander?" Lieutenant Park asked, his eyes alert despite their 30-hour journey. Elena nodded, squaring her shoulders. "Let's make a good first impression." The delegation stepped through the airlock into the Conclave Station, a massive structure housing representatives from 17 spacefaring civilizations. Elena immediately noticed how different species reacted to their arrival. The crystalline Vordarians' facets flickered with rapid light patterns, the gaseous Xilthine contracted their cloudy forms, and the insectoid Morvax antennae flattened against their carapaces. "They seem nervous," Dr. Abrams whispered. "Cautious," Elena corrected. "They're studying us." The Conclave's reception hall buzzed with translation devices as the human delegation was presented. Elena caught fragments of conversations that didn't reach their translators, hushed exchanges accompanied by furtive glances. During formal introductions, a tall, spindly alien identified as Ambassador Skrull of the Xilthine approached. "Your journey was comfortable?" the alien asked, its voice rendered in slightly mechanical English. "Quite," Elena replied. 30 hours is a relatively short trip by our standards." The Xilthine's cloudy form swirled faster. "You remained conscious the entire time." "We rotated sleep shifts," Elena explained, noticing the ambassador's apparent surprise. "Is that unusual?" Before receiving an answer, they were ushered to the welcome banquet. The massive hall displayed foods from various worlds, with environmental controls creating different atmospheric bubbles for species with incompatible requirements. An hour into the event, Elena felt the temperature rising. The human delegation section had grown noticeably warmer, now approaching 40 degrees Celsius with crushing humidity. She watched alien representatives gradually retreat from the heat, their biological functions clearly strained. The Morvac delegates departed entirely, their exoskeletons apparently unable to regulate temperature efficiently. Elena removed her jacket, pushing back damp hair. "Reminds me of summer in Nicaragua," she commented casually to her team. "Though not quite as humid as Singapore, that time we had the ASEAN summit." The humans adjusted while continuing diplomatic conversations, sharing stories about Earth's varied climates and survival situations they'd experienced. Elena noticed several conclave members observing them with what appeared to be both scientific interest and alarm. After 3 hours of the malfunctioning environmental controls, a Vordarian technician finally restored normal temperature. The crystalline being's facets had dulled significantly from the strain. "Apologies for the inconvenience," it said, voice patterns suggesting astonishment that humans remained functional. That night in her quarters, Elena feigned sleep while reviewing the day's events. Her instincts, honed through years of military service, alerted her to a presence. Through narrowly opened eyes, she observed a Xilthine scientist hovering near her bed, a scanning device directed toward her body. The translator at her bedside picked up fragments. "Remains semi-conscious even during rest phase. Neural activity continues at 68% capacity, capable of instant alertness. Imagine if they decided to conquer rather than talk." Elena memorized every word, maintaining her breathing pattern. The alien departed, unaware its observations had been noted. Her concerns proved prescient when, at 300 station time, alarms blared throughout the structure. Elena was instantly awake, finding Lieutenant Park already at her door. "Station's been knocked off course," he reported tersely. "We're on a decaying orbit toward the system's sun. Life support failing across multiple sectors." Elena's team assembled in seconds, moving purposefully while aliens throughout the station panicked. Reaching the Environmental Control Center, they found Vordarian engineers struggling to restore systems, their crystalline bodies already showing signs of stress fractures. "How long have you been working on this?" Elena asked the lead engineer. 20 minutes, the Vordarian responded, voice strained. But our concentration diminishes rapidly under pressure. We require regenerative cycles every few hours. Elena nodded to Park. Take over the environmental stabilization. Dr. Abrams, coordinate life support allocation. Rodriguez, help me with navigational correction. For the next 72 hours, the human delegation worked continuously, taking only brief stimulant-aided rest periods while applying techniques developed in Earth's most extreme environments. They adapted space station equipment designed for Vordarian physiology, improvised repair techniques from limited supplies, and maintained focus despite rising temperatures and falling oxygen levels. By the second day, most alien crew members had collapsed from exhaustion or retreated to emergency hibernation chambers. Elena's team pushed through physical pain, sleep deprivation, and hunger, their bodies burning stored fat and their minds remaining functional despite conditions that had incapacitated other species. On the third day, as they finally stabilized the station's orbit, Elena caught sight of a monitoring panel. Behind the one-way glass stood several high-ranking conclave members, observing the humans with what could only be described as horrified fascination. They'd been watching us the entire time, she realized. This was a test. When the crisis ended, Elena confronted the conclave leadership, her body exhausted but her mind perfectly clear. The Tsilphine ambassador's control appeared genuinely disturbed. You continued functioning for 3 days under conditions that would debilitate or kill most species, the ambassador stated. No rest, minimal sustenance, extreme stress, yet you maintained complex problem-solving abilities. We did what was necessary, Elena replied simply. Indeed, the ambassador's cloudy form rippled. And that is precisely what concerns us. Your species possesses an endurance that defies biological norms. The conclave will need to reconsider certain assumptions. As the human delegation departed, Elena overheard one Morvac security officer chittering to another. They don't stop. Even when they should physically collapse, they continue. What could possibly defeat such creatures if they ever decided we were enemies? Elena smiled grimly, understanding for the first time why humanity's invitation to the conclave had been so long delayed. It wasn't our technology they feared. It was us. Dr. Sanjay Patel had never been good at following rules. His brilliance as a xenobiologist was matched only by his tendency to access databases above his clearance level. 3 weeks after the accident on the conclave station, he found himself in a restricted section of Earth's newly established alien data repository, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Come on, he muttered, bypassing another security protocol. Show me what you're hiding. His unauthorized deep dive into conclave scientific archives had begun with a hunch. The aliens' reactions to humans seemed too consistent. Not the varied responses expected from first contact, but the unified wariness of species who already knew what they were dealing with. When Sanjay finally breached the encrypted xenobiology database, what he found confirmed his suspicions and sent ice through his veins. The conclave had been studying Earth for centuries, with humanity classified under a designation that translated roughly as persistence predators. A lengthy footnote explained the term. The only known sapient species evolved to chase prey until cardiovascular collapse. My God, Sanjay whispered, downloading files as quickly as possible. The archive contained detailed physiological comparisons between humans and other intelligent species, where the Vordarians had evolved as crystalline energy conservers, capable of incredible computational efficiency but requiring frequent regenerative cycles. Humans had developed as stamina-based generalists with redundant systems and the ability to function despite accumulated damage. The Tsilphine gaseous beings who processed information through collective molecular exchanges required molecular stability periods that humans would consider rest. Even the insectoid Morvac, despite their impressive exoskeletons, had metabolic limitations humans lacked. A classified directive caught his attention, something called the Endurance Protocol. The document detailed a series of increasingly difficult tests designed to assess human physiological responses under duress. Sanjay's blood ran cold when he realized the station disaster had been deliberately engineered as Test Scenario 12B. Security alarms blared suddenly. Sanjay grabbed his data crystal and ran, barely escaping before security forces arrived. 6 hours later, after a harrowing journey through back channels, he reached Commander Elena Reyes' temporary office at the International Space Agency. "You need to see this," he said, dropping the data crystal on her desk without preamble. Elena's expression hardened as she reviewed the files. "They've been watching us, testing us, like animals in a laboratory," Sanjay confirmed. "And they're terrified of what they've discovered." The following day, Elena and Sanjay requested an emergency meeting with the conclave representatives who had remained on Earth. The Sylphine ambassador's troll's gaseous form seemed to thin noticeably when confronted with the evidence. "You were never meant to access those files," the ambassador said, bioluminescent patterns flickering rapidly beneath its cloudy exterior. "Yet here we are," Elena replied calmly. "Why has the conclave been studying us without our knowledge or consent?" After a long silence, the ambassador's translator produced an answer. "Because your species represents a biological anomaly that could potentially destabilize interstellar peace." The elderly Sylphine's form expanded slightly as it continued. "Consider the evolutionary path of the 17 known intelligent species. The Vordarians evolved to process complex crystalline formations with minimal energy expenditure. The Morvac developed precise hive coordination requiring synchronized metabolic cycles. My own species achieved intelligence through molecular collective consciousness requiring periods of particulate stability." "And humans?" Elena prompted. "Your species evolved by exhausting your prey," the ambassador stated flatly. "You lack the specialized advantages of other beings, but you possess one trait in quantities that disturb our evolutionary biologists. You continue functioning where other species surrender to metabolic necessity." The Sylphine's form pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that the translator struggled to interpret. "You postpone sleep, ignore hunger, push through pain, and maintain cognitive function despite biological damage. What could stop a species that simply refuses to yield?" Sanjay leaned forward. "So the station disaster, that was deliberate." "Test Scenario 12B," the ambassador acknowledged. "We needed to understand how humans would respond to prolonged crisis conditions. Your performance confirmed our greatest concerns. No conclave species could have maintained function as your team did." Before Elena could respond, the doors burst open. Armed Morvac security officers swarmed the room, mandibles clicking aggressively. Behind them, a tall, carapace-covered figure entered. Admiral Thax, the Morvac military representative to the conclave. "This meeting is unauthorized," the admiral chittered, compound eyes fixed on the Sylphine ambassador. "You have revealed classified information to a potential threat species. They discovered it themselves." Ambassador's troll countered, cloudy form swirling defensively. "Perhaps it is time for transparency rather than fear." The Morvac admiral's mandibles clicked in what might have been derision. "Your faction has always been weak. The containment directive has been approved. The humans know too much." Elena stood slowly, carefully keeping her hands visible. "Containment directive. The danger your species represents cannot be allowed to spread beyond your solar system," Admiral Thax stated flatly. "The conclave has been divided on how to proceed, but my faction now has authority. Your biological advantages make you an unacceptable risk to galactic stability." Sanjay's eyes widened. "You're planning to quarantine Earth, or worse." The Admiral's chittering took on a darker tone. "Preemptive security measures have already begun. Your outer colonies are being neutralized as we speak." Elena's implanted communicator vibrated subtly against her skull, an emergency override signal from Earth Command. She maintained her composure while accessing the message internally. "Multiple ATTACKs on lunar base and Mineras colonies. Unknown alien vessels. Heavy keys, UAL ties. Return to HQ, MNEDA, Eloy. You've started a war, she said quietly, meeting the Morvac Admiral's compound gaze. We've initiated containment, he corrected. Your species will be restricted to your home planet under Conclave supervision. Resistance is inadvisable. Our military technology far exceeds yours. Belina smiled thinly. Perhaps, but I don't think you understand what you're dealing with, Admiral. We understand precisely what we face, the Morvac replied. A physically unexceptional species with one evolutionary quirk, the ability to continue functioning beyond normal biological limits. And you think that's a small advantage? Sanjay asked incredulously. It is insufficient against our technological superiority, the Admiral stated confidently. The Sylphine ambassadors form pulsed with urgent patterns. You underestimate them, Admiral. Their endurance applies not just to their bodies but to their will. History suggests they do not surrender when conventionally defeated. We shall see, the Morvac responded dismissively. As Elena was escorted from the room, she caught the Sylphine ambassador's final transmission, a pattern of light that her neural implant translated privately. They do not understand what they have begun. A species that evolved to run down faster prey will not be conquered by speed. Prepare your people, Commander. The Morvac expect a swift victory. Show them what humans do when truly tested. Belina's jaw tightened as she mentally composed her report to Earth Command. The aliens had made a critical error. They had mistaken humanity's greatest strength for a minor evolutionary quirk. Now they would learn exactly why interstellar species feared human endurance. Lieutenant Maya Chen hadn't expected to command a defense of humanity from the mining outpost on Ceres. The former Deep Core engineer had been overseeing extraction operations when the Morvac attack fleet appeared without warning in the outer solar system. Status report, she demanded, scanning the makeshift operations center they'd established in the mine's subsurface bunker. 3 Morvac cruisers in orbit, reported Technician Williams, his illuminated illuminated by holographic displays. They've deployed ground forces at extraction points 3, 7, and 9. Our militia has engaged them at all locations. Chen nodded grimly. Their militia consisted of miners with hastily weaponized mining equipment and a handful of security personnel. Against trained Morvac soldiers, it should have been a massacre. Instead, surprisingly, they were holding their own. They attack in waves, she observed, studying the tactical display. 4 hours of intense combat, then 12 hours of minimal activity. Dr. Levinson, the outpost's medical officer, looked up from treating a wounded miner. It's their biology. The Morvac nervous system requires a dormancy cycle after periods of heightened activity. They physically cannot maintain combat effectiveness without rest. Chen's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. So they expect us to follow the same pattern. To need recovery time between engagements. Most species would, Levinson confirmed. Their battle doctrine has probably never been challenged by an opponent who doesn't share similar biological limitations. A slow smile spread across Chen's face. Distribute stims to all frontline personnel. We're going to give them something they've never seen before. For the next 30 hours, Chen's forces maintained continuous harassment of Morvac positions. When the aliens attacked, humans defended conventionally. But when the Morvac withdrew for their biological rest period, the miners launched their own offensives, targeting enemy supply lines and communication nodes. By the 3rd cycle, intercepted Morvac communications revealed growing confusion and alarm. Their commanders couldn't comprehend how the same human defenders remained combat effective without rotation. On Earth, similar patterns emerged across all combat theaters as humanity adapted to exploit the fundamental weakness in Morvac battle doctrine. On the 28th hour of continuous operations, a Morvac officer approached the human lines under a flag of truce. Chen met him at the designated neutral zone, fighting to keep her exhaustion from showing despite her stimulant-dilated pupils and the tremor in her hands. "You request parley?" she asked the insectoid being. The Morvek's mandibles clicked rapidly, compound eyes reflecting Chen's haggard appearance. "We wish to collect our fallen. A temporary cessation of hostilities is traditional in such circumstances." Chen nodded. "Granted. 2 hours." The Morvek officer studied her curiously. "You are the same commander who faced our initial assault." "I am." "How is this possible?" "You have been in continuous combat operations for more than a full planetary rotation." Chen shrugged. "We're understaffed. Everyone pulls extra shifts." The Morvek's antennae flickered in what translated as disbelief. "Your species does not require recovery cycles. Metabolic regeneration periods." "We require sleep," Chen acknowledged. "But not all at once, and not on anyone else's schedule." The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly in what she guessed was agitation. "This violates conventional combat protocols. Forces require synchronized rest periods." "Says who?" Chen challenged, fighting to keep her voice steady as fatigue toxins built up in her system. "All civilized species understand the biological necessities of." "We're not like your other opponents," Chen interrupted. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters. Before we had technology, we chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion." She leaned forward, studying her own reflection in the Morvek's compound eyes. "We've been preparing for this fight since before your ancestors left their homeworld." Across the solar system, similar realizations were dawning on Morvek commanders. On Mars Colony, General Rodriguez had implemented a strategy of deliberate sleep cycle disruption, rotating small strike teams to attack Morvek positions exclusively during their rest periods. After 2 weeks of continuous sleep disruption, entire Morvek units began experiencing mass hallucinations, their neurological systems breaking down from forced wakefulness. At the Neptune outpost, Commander Jackson had discovered that continuous low-frequency sonic emissions interfered with Morvek dormancy cycles. Unable to achieve proper rest, the invading forces became increasingly erratic, making catastrophic tactical errors that humans exploited ruthlessly. The most devastating revelation for the Morvek High Command came from an incident on Europa. A squad of human Marines, cut off from support and supplies, had maintained guerrilla operations against a superior Morvek force for 17 days without relief. When finally captured, the squad leader, delirious from exhaustion, but still combat effective, explained to his interrogator how humans had evolved to run down prey animals over days of pursuit. "We don't need to outgun you," the Marine had said, his cracked lips forming a smile despite his injuries. "We just need to outlast you." The recording of this interrogation spread through the Morvek command structure, creating a psychological impact far beyond its tactical significance. For a species that had evolved with rigid biological rhythms, the concept of an opponent who could simply choose to override their own body's demands was profoundly disturbing. "They are not fighting according to any recognizable doctrine," reported Field Commander Colfax to the Morvek High Command. "They do not respect conventional engagement cycles. They attack when we rest. They defend when we attack. They continue fighting despite injuries that would incapacitate our forces. Even when we destroy their supply lines, they adapt by entering a conservation mode where they function on minimal resources." The High Command's response revealed growing concern. How can they maintain combat effectiveness without biological recovery periods? "They do require sleep," Colfax clarified, "but not in synchronized group cycles. They fragment their rest periods and rotate active personnel. We have observed humans functioning effectively despite accumulating what should be debilitating sleep deficits." "This defies evolutionary logic," the High Command replied. "No species can indefinitely postpone biological necessities." "They are not postponing indefinitely," Colfax explained. "They are enduring longer, operating through higher pain thresholds, and continuing function despite conditions that would trigger automatic metabolic shutdown in our forces." As the conflict stretched into its 3rd month with no sign of human capitulation, the Morvek began receiving increasingly desperate field reports from commanders across the solar system. One assessment, compiled by the Morvek's chief xenobiologist, delivered the most disturbing conclusion. The human's primary advantage is not technological but biological. They evolved as pursuit predators who ran down faster prey through superior endurance. This evolutionary adaptation has been integrated into their military doctrine, creating a force that simply refuses to yield to conventional metabolic limitations. They do not stop. They do not tire. Even their wounded continue fighting. Standard containment protocols are proving ineffective against a species that has evolved specifically to outlast their opponents. As Lieutenant Chen reviewed the defenses on Ceres after 40 days of continuous conflict, she received word that Admiral Elena Rice was proposing a counteroffensive so audacious that even most humans considered it impossible. The plan would test human endurance beyond anything in recorded history, and might finally convince the Morvac that they had gravely underestimated what humans were capable of enduring. Admiral Elena Rice stood before the holographic display in Earth's military command center, the titanium reinforcements in her spine unnaturally straight as she outlined a plan so audacious it bordered on suicidal. The Morvac flagship Inexorable maintains a defensive perimeter of 15 kilometers, she explained to the assembled officers. Their security protocols track all vessel movements within this zone, but they don't monitor individual life forms. They can't conceive of biological entities surviving in raw space. General Hammond stared at her in disbelief. You're proposing an EVA infiltration through open space. That's a 15-kilometer crossing in vacuum conditions. Admiral. Precisely. Elena nodded. They won't be looking for it, because they believe it's biologically impossible. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. Even with advanced EVA suits, no human had ever attempted a spacewalk of such duration and distance. The exposure to cosmic radiation alone would be devastating, not to mention the psychological impact of 15 kilometers of void with nothing but a thin fabric barrier between life and instant death. I'll need volunteers, Elena continued. 5 individuals with very specific qualifications. Within 24 hours, she had her team. Major Alejandro Diaz, a deep-sea rescue specialist whose work in crushing ocean pressures had given him unique insights into extreme environment survival. His research on controlled oxygen consumption had revolutionized underwater rescue techniques. Dr. Lena Okafor, a high-altitude mountaineer and xenophysiologist who had summited Earth's highest peaks without supplemental oxygen. Her body had adapted to function in oxygen-depleted environments that would incapacitate most humans. Corporal Takashi Watanabe, former holder of the record for longest continuous spacewalk at 27 hours. His neural scans showed unusual resistance to the spatial disorientation that plagued most astronauts. Engineer Fatima Rahman, whose survival story had become legendary after 3 weeks trapped in a collapsed Antarctic research station. She had maintained not only her own survival, but engineered solutions to keep 5 other researchers alive in sub-zero temperatures with minimal supplies. Communications Officer Jack Harper, whose experimental neural implants allowed him to function despite extreme sleep deprivation. Originally designed to help narcolepsy patients, his augmentations permitted conscious control of microsleep episodes. The mission launched during a pitched battle near Jupiter's orbit. As Earth forces engaged the Morvac in conventional combat, drawing attention to capital ship movements, the 5-person team deployed from the rear airlock of the damaged frigate Intrepid. Commence Operation Voidwalk, Elena's voice crackled through their comms. May your endurance light the way home. The team pushed off from the frigate's hull, using minimal thrust from their maneuvering packs to avoid detection. Before them stretched 15 kilometers of empty space, with the massive Morvac command ship a distant, ominous silhouette against Jupiter's swirling surface. Remember your training, Major Diaz instructed as they moved away from the Intrepid. Controlled breathing, minimal movements, conservation protocols in effect. For the first 6 hours, they made steady progress, their specialized EVA suits providing better radiation protection than standard models, though still inadequate for such prolonged exposure. The crossing proceeded in near silence, each team member focused entirely on the discipline of survival. Then disaster struck. A micrometeoroid shower, possibly debris from the ongoing battle, tore through their formation. Ramen's and Harper's propulsion systems were punctured, venting precious maneuvering gas into space. "I've lost propulsion," Ramen reported, her voice steady despite the catastrophic setback. Protocol dictated mission abort. No Morvac would have continued under such circumstances. But these were humans. "I'll tell Harper," Dr. Okafor stated immediately. "Ramen, Dias can assist you." "Negative," Harper interjected. "Too much strain on your systems. We'll manage manual navigation." What followed tested human ingenuity and endurance beyond any previous benchmark. Dias physically linked to Ramen, using their suit's emergency tethers, literally pulling her through space while conserving his own propellant. Harper, meanwhile, converted his damaged propulsion unit into a manually controlled system, using carefully timed releases of his remaining gas to maintain course. 10 hours into the crossing, radiation exposure began taking its toll. All team members experienced nausea and cognitive disruption, yet they maintained mission focus, calculating trajectories and conserving energy with mechanical precision. Morvac vessel now 8 kilometers distant, Watanabe reported at hour 12. "No indication they've detected us." "They're not looking for us," Okafor observed through gritted teeth, fighting waves of radiation sickness. "Their sensors track ships, not individual biological signatures. They can't imagine anyone attempting this crossing." The team's life support systems, stressed beyond design parameters, began degrading. Oxygen recyclers operated at 60% efficiency as hour 15 approached. Core body temperatures dropped dangerously as their suits struggled to maintain heat in the absolute zero of space. "Status report," Dias called, his voice noticeably strained. "Functioning," came 4 responses, each bearing the unmistakable signature of humans pushing beyond normal biological limits. By hour 17, they'd reached the outer hull of the inexorable, their bodies simultaneously freezing and radiation burned, their minds fog-bound from oxygen deprivation, yet still calculating entry strategies. Using Dias's deep-sea cutting tools, they breached an external maintenance port, a task that required micro-precision despite their deteriorating physical condition. The Morvac, having never conceived of such an approach, had left these access points with minimal internal security. The team dragged themselves through the narrow maintenance shaft, finally reaching an internal atmosphere junction where they could remove their helmets. "We made it," Ramen whispered, her face gray from radiation exposure, broken blood vessels marking her skin. The team administered emergency anti-radiation compounds and stimulants, forcing their damaged bodies to continue functioning. While they would all require extensive medical treatment for radiation poisoning if they survived, their immediate focus remained unchanged. Reach the command deck and transmit the ship's defensive codes to the Earth fleet. Moving through the Morvac vessel's ventilation system, they encountered no resistance, not because of superior stealth, but because the ship's designers had never imagined biological entities could reach this location without a vessel. It was the equivalent of fish swimming through air, a biological impossibility that required no defensive consideration. When they finally breached the command deck, the Morvac officer's reaction was not anger but pure biological shock. Their compound eyes registered beings who, by all evolutionary logic, should have perished hours ago from exposure to conditions that would kill any known intelligent species. "Impossible," the Morvac commander chittered, mandibles freezing mid-movement. "You cannot be here. No biological entity can traverse open space for that distance. Human beings can," Dias replied simply, his radiation-damaged body barely supporting his weight as he secured the command center. While Ramen and Watanabe restrained the Morvac officers, Okafor and Harper accessed the ship's communication array, transmitting defensive codes and shield frequencies to the Earth fleet. As the last transmission completed, Harper collapsed from radiation sickness, followed quickly by the others. The Morvek commander, still restrained but regaining composure, studied the failing humans with a new emotion registering in his compound eyes, something approaching horrified respect. What manner of evolution produces beings who would endure such conditions? He asked as Dias fought to remain conscious. What selective pressures create creatures who choose radiation poisoning and vacuum exposure rather than defeat? Dias managed a pained smile as darkness encroached on his vision. We evolved, chasing things that tried to outrun us, he explained. We never learned when to stop. As consciousness faded, his final thought was of Admiral Reyes receiving their transmission. The mission had succeeded not through superior technology or firepower, but through the uniquely human capacity to endure conditions that other intelligent species considered lethal barriers. The Morvac would learn what humans had known since they first chased prey across prehistoric savannas. Sometimes victory doesn't go to the strongest or fastest, but to those who simply refuse to surrender when their bodies demand they stop. Colonel Xander Wade had spent 15 years in special forces before transferring to psychological operations. His specialty, breaking enemy will through asymmetric pressure, had never been tested against a non-human opponent until now. Their weakness is obvious, he explained to the Joint Chiefs, pointing to neural scans captured from Morvek prisoners. They require complete dormancy cycles. Unlike humans who can function on fragmented sleep, their neurophysiology operates in binary states, either fully conscious or completely dormant. The audacious infiltration of the Morvac flagship had yielded critical intelligence beyond defensive codes. Medical analysis of captured Morvac revealed they physically couldn't function without 12-hour regenerative cycles every 36 hours. Their neural pathways literally shut down without this dormancy period, causing catastrophic cognitive failures. We've been fighting conventionally, Wade continued. We need to weaponize their biological necessity against them. Admiral Reyes, recently promoted after the successful Void Walker operation, nodded. Propose your strategy, Colonel. Operation Insomnia, Wade said, displaying a complex tactical schematic. We stop trying to destroy their fleet and focus instead on disrupting their sleep cycles. No large engagements, no predictable patterns, just continuous, randomized harassment that never allows them to establish reliable dormancy periods. The strategy required a fundamental shift in Earth's military doctrine. Rather than concentrating forces for decisive battles, human vessels dispersed into small, autonomous strike teams that attacked Morvac positions in seemingly random patterns, focusing not on destruction, but on disruption. Dr. Sanjay Patel, working with military neurologists, developed the controversial combat stimulant dubbed Marathoner to support the new doctrine. The compound allowed human soldiers to function effectively for up to 72 hours with only brief microsleep episodes, giving them a decisive advantage over Morvac forces requiring complete unconsciousness. This crosses ethical boundaries, Dr. Patel admitted during the approval hearing. But we're exploiting a fundamental asymmetry between our species. They can't adapt to sleep fragmentation. Their neurology doesn't permit it. We can. 3 weeks into Operation Insomnia, the effects became apparent across all combat theaters. Morvac ships began experiencing catastrophic errors as sleep-deprived crews made increasingly dangerous mistakes. Communications intercepts revealed growing psychological distress among Morvac forces, with unprecedented rates of neurological breakdowns. Aboard the Relentless, a human corvette implementing the new doctrine, Lieutenant Sofia Martinez maintained a punishing schedule. 4 hours of harassment operations, 2 hours of evasive maneuvers, repeat with minimal rest. Her crew rotated sleek shifts while maintaining continuous pressure on the Morvac cruiser they'd been assigned to shadow. They're falling apart, Martinez reported after their 5th consecutive day of operations. Their response times have degraded by 60%. They've stopped deploying fighter screens because their pilots can't maintain basic flight coordination. The psychological impact proved even more devastating than the tactical advantages. Intercepted communications revealed growing dread among Morvac forces about facing an enemy that watches while we sleep. Their evolutionary psychology, never adapted for predators that hunted during rest periods, manifested as a species-wide anxiety that human xenopsychologists compared to severe sleep paralysis terrors. They're experiencing something akin to prehistoric humans' fear of night predators, explained Dr. Amara Williams, chief xenopsychologist. But where we evolved to manage that fear, their species never developed psychological defenses against threats during dormancy cycles. It's triggering cascade failures in their social cohesion. The turning point came 40 days into Operation Insomnia. The Morvac flagship Indomitable, pride of their fleet, transmitted a surrender request after its crew, awake for nearly 7 consecutive days, due to constant harassment, began experiencing mass hallucinations. Tactical systems recorded increasingly erratic behavior before the ship's commander, hollow-eyed and physically deteriorating, appeared on communications channels. "We request cessation of hostilities," the Morvac commander chittered, mandibles barely coordinated enough to form words. "Your strategy violates all evolutionary constraints. How can biological entities remain functional through such sustained operations?" Later analysis of captured Morvac vessels revealed the devastating neurological impact of sleep deprivation on their species. Unlike humans, who experienced gradual cognitive degradation that could be partially mitigated, Morvac neurology simply collapsed after extended wakefulness. Their binary neural structure provided no adaptability to disrupted sleep cycles. During debriefing, a captured Morvac officer expressed the sentiment that would eventually reach the conclave. "You have weaponized our need for rest. How does one defeat an enemy who has mastered their own biological limitations, who continues fighting when all evolutionary logic dictates surrender to metabolic necessity?" As the conflict reached equilibrium, with Morvac forces retreating to defensive positions and human ships maintaining their relentless pressure, Colonel Wade received an unexpected communication from the moderate faction of the conclave. "Their psychology is breaking before their bodies do," he told Admiral Reyes, showing her the transmission. "The moderates are pushing for peace talks." "On what terms?" Reyes asked cautiously. Wade smiled grimly. "That's the interesting part. They're proposing continuous negotiations without breaks until resolution. They think they can outlast us in a different arena. They still don't understand what they're dealing with," Reyes observed. "No," Wade agreed. "They've learned we can outfight them through superior endurance, but they haven't accepted the broader implication that human persistence extends beyond the battlefield." As plans formed for the unprecedented diplomatic engagement, Wade reflected on humanity's unique evolutionary path. What had begun as an adaptation for hunting on prehistoric savannas had become the decisive factor in an interstellar conflict. The Morvac had superior technology, more advanced weapons, and greater numbers, but they required rest. Humans didn't. At least, not on anyone else's schedule. Admiral Elena Reyes studied the conclave's peace proposal with narrowed eyes. After 4 months of conflict that had demonstrated humanity's unexpected advantages in warfare, the moderate faction had finally gained enough influence to propose negotiations. The terms, however, contained a telling stipulation. They want continuous sessions without breaks until resolution is reached, she told the assembled Earth leadership. Their xenopsychologists still believe they can find some arena where our endurance is a liability rather than an asset. President Kwan leaned forward. And what's your assessment? They're desperate, Elena replied. They've lost militarily because they require rest cycles our forces don't. Now they're attempting to exploit formal diplomatic procedures, which traditionally include recess periods for consultation and recovery. Can we maintain effective negotiation through a continuous session? Asked Secretary Chen. Even human diplomats need sleep. Elena smiled thinly. They do, just not all at the same time. 24 hours later, in the neutral diplomatic facility established on Luna, Elena led the human delegation into what would become known as the Diplomatic Ultramarathon. The conclave representatives, a crystalline Bordarian, a gaseous Xilthine, and a heavily armored Morvac, waited with the confidence of species who believed they'd finally found human limits. We propose negotiations continue without interruption until all articles are resolved, announced the Vordarian representative, facets gleaming smugly. Standard diplomatic protocol includes regular recesses, but given humanity's unique physiology, we assume continuous proceedings would be acceptable. Completely acceptable, Belin agreed smoothly, with one additional stipulation. All participating species must be represented by their original delegates throughout the entire process. No substitutions allowed. The alien representatives exchanged glances but agreed, not recognizing the trap Elena had set. While the conclave expected to outlast humans in a battle of focused concentration, they hadn't understood the fundamental strategy humans had employed since prehistoric times: energy conservation through rotation. As proceedings began, the human team implemented their secret advantage. While maintaining a consistent three-person presence at the table led by Elena, other team members unobtrusively rotated through carefully timed 90-minute sleep cycles in an adjacent preparation room. A sophisticated signaling system allowed seamless handoffs of negotiating points while appearing to maintain continuity. By hour 36, the first signs of strain appeared among the alien delegates. The Vordarian representative's crystalline structure began developing microfractures from sustained cognition without regenerative cycles. The Tsilthine's gaseous form noticeably thinned as molecular cohesion degraded under continuous concentration. Article 17 requires further discussion. The Morvac delegate chittered on the third day, mandibles slightly uncoordinated. Reparations cannot exceed 30% of disputed resources. Alina, who had just returned from a 90-minute sleep cycle while her deputy maintained continuity, responded with precision. Considering the unprovoked nature of hostilities, 50% represents a reasonable starting position. The Morvac's compound eyes registered increasing disorientation. 40% would represent significant concession from. The alien's voice trailed off, its mandibles clicking randomly as microsleep episodes began disrupting cognitive function. The Vordarian hastily intervened, facets dulling from exhaustion. The conclave acknowledges humanity's position. Perhaps we could address Article 18 while our colleague recovers focus. By the fourth day, the situation had deteriorated significantly for the alien delegation. The Morvac representative accidentally agreed to full reparations during a microsleep episode, nodding agreement to terms it would never have accepted with full cognitive function. The Tsilthine's gaseous form had contracted so severely that its translation devices struggled to maintain cohesion. Human negotiators, meanwhile, maintained consistent mental acuity through their careful rotation system. While individual team members showed signs of fatigue, the table presence remained sharp, pressing advantages whenever alien representatives faltered. The most dramatic moment came on day 7. The Vordarian chief negotiator, attempting to articulate a complex position on territorial boundaries, suddenly shattered, its crystalline structure literally breaking apart from sustained cognitive stress. Crystalline fragments scattered across the negotiation table as attendants rushed to collect the pieces for regeneration. The Vordarian delegation appears unable to continue, Elena observed neutrally. According to our agreed terms, this would conclude negotiations with human terms, as the standing proposal. The remaining conclave representatives faced an impossible choice: concede to human demands or violate their own rules by requesting substitution or recess. After hurried consultation, they surrendered to the inevitable. The conclave accepts the terms as currently outlined, the Tsilthine representative stated, its translucent form barely visible from exhaustion. The final agreement will be recorded as proposed by the human delegation. The resulting endurance accords fundamentally rewrote humanity's position in interstellar politics. Beyond securing peace and reparations, the agreement established humans as diplomatic forces to be reckoned with, beings who negotiated with the same relentless persistence with which they fought. During the formal signing ceremony 24 hours later, the fully rested human delegation faced their still recovering counterparts. The Morvac representative, mandibles clicking with residual stress patterns, addressed Alina privately. "Your strategy was effectively employed," the alien acknowledged. "We assumed that mental fatigue would affect all species equally in complex negotiations." Alina nodded. "You made the same mistake in diplomacy that you made in warfare, assuming biological limitations are universal constants rather than species-specific variables. A costly error," the Morvac agreed, "one the Conclave will not repeat." "Then we've reached genuine understanding," Alina replied. Later, as Earth celebrated the diplomatic victory, Alina met with her team for debriefing. The 12 negotiators, despite their rotation strategy, all showed signs of extreme fatigue after maintaining the charade of continuous presence. "We've taught them something fundamental about humanity," Alina told her exhausted colleagues. "Not just that we can endure, but that we adapt our endurance to each challenge." They expected to find a limit of human persistence. Instead, they discovered that whatever arena they choose, whatever rules they impose, we will find ways to persist beyond what they believe possible. Dr. Patel, who had observed the proceedings as xenobiology consultant, offered a thoughtful analysis. Their evolutionary history never required adaptation to predators who hunted during rest cycles. Our persistence wasn't just a physical advantage in warfare, it represents a psychological framework they cannot comprehend. The concept of continuing despite biological signals to stop simply doesn't exist in their decision-making. As Alina prepared her formal report, she recognized that humanity had crossed a threshold in interstellar relations. The Conclave species now understood that humans wouldn't be defeated through conventional strategies based on biological limitations. What they hadn't yet grasped was that human endurance, properly channeled, could serve purposes beyond victory. That lesson would require a different approach, one that transformed fear into respect, and respect into cooperation. Peace remained fragile despite the endurance accords. While open hostilities had ceased, interspecies tensions simmered beneath diplomatic civility. The Conclave species had learned to fear human endurance, but fear rarely built lasting alliances. 3 months after the diplomatic ultramarathon, a visionary Xilthine philosopher named Jikalavex proposed a radical solution. Its glowing form pulsed with complex patterns as it addressed the Conclave's General Assembly. "We have approached this interaction incorrectly," the philosopher's translator conveyed. "We feared humanity's evolutionary adaptations as weapons, yet our own specialized traits would appear equally threatening viewed through a lens of conflict. Perhaps we should reframe our perspective." The proposal was audacious, a competitive exhibition where each species could demonstrate their unique evolutionary advantages in controlled, non-destructive environments. The inaugural Crucible Games would showcase biological diversity as cause for celebration rather than alarm. When the invitation reached Earth, Admiral Alina Rice recognized the diplomatic opportunity it represented. "This is our chance to recontextualize human endurance," she told President Kwan, "to demonstrate that the same traits that make us formidable opponents can make us valuable allies." Preparations consumed 6 months, with 27 worlds constructing specialized arenas to showcase their species' unique capabilities. The Vordarians built crystal manipulation chambers, where competitors created complex geometric structures through mental control of gravitational fields. The Xilthine designed sensory mazes that required navigating through molecular patterns invisible to most species. The Morvac demonstrated precision hive coordination in synchronized challenges requiring thousands of participants to function as a single organism. Human events, by contrast, focused entirely on endurance challenges that other species found simultaneously fascinating and disturbing. The primary venue, constructed in Earth's Atacama Desert, hosted competitions that tested the limits of sustained human performance. The games opened with representatives from each world demonstrating their evolutionary specializations to thunderous applause from a multi-species audience. Then came humanity's showcase events, Ultramarathoner Kai Levinson performed the Endless March, completing a 500-kilometer mountain crossing that took 3 continuous days. Cognitive specialist Dr. Amara Williams demonstrated human mental endurance by solving complex mathematical theorems after 72 sleepless hours while submerged in sensory deprivation fluid. The team-based Persistence Hunt followed tagged prey droids across an expansive wilderness without technological assistance, showcasing the prehistoric hunting style that had shaped human evolution. Audience reactions mixed awe with visceral discomfort. The Vordarians' crystalline structures vibrated with what their translators described as respectful apprehension. Morvac representatives chittered anxiously as humans pushed through pain barriers their species considered absolute metabolic stop signals. They continued despite clear biological damage. One Silthene observer noted, "How do their regulatory systems permit such override functions?" The games transformed dramatically on the 4th day when a massive solar flare overwhelmed the protective shielding around the arena planet. Environmental systems failed catastrophically, plunging competition zones into sub-zero temperatures, while atmospheric processors malfunctioned, releasing toxic compounds. Emergency protocols activated immediately, but evacuation facilities could only accommodate a fraction of participants and spectators. What began as a celebration of biological diversity became a genuine survival crisis that tested every species' adaptations under real-world pressure. The expected outcome: competition devolving into chaos, never materialized. Instead, the crisis revealed humanity's endurance in an entirely new context. Exhausted human ultramarathoners organized rescue operations, carrying injured Silthene through snowstorms, when the gaseous beings began losing molecular cohesion in the cold. Sleep-deprived mathematicians calculated emergency resource allocations that maximized survival for species with incompatible biological requirements. Persistence hunters tracked down missing alien competitors who had fled in panic. Kai Levinson, already exhausted from his endurance event, led a rescue team into a collapsed habitat dome where several Vordarian youths were trapped. For 26 continuous hours, he worked to stabilize the structure while environmental conditions deteriorated, refusing evacuation until every crystalline being had been safely removed. Dr. Williams, despite severe cognitive strain from her earlier demonstration, coordinated cross-species medical responses, developing treatment protocols for atmospheric contamination across 17 distinct biologies. When asked how she maintained function despite her obvious exhaustion, she replied simply, "Someone needs to keep going. Humans are good at that." Most dramatic was the rescue led by the human persistence hunting team. When a group of Morvac juveniles became disoriented in the wilderness after their guardians collapsed from environmental stress, the human hunters tracked them across 70 kilometers of hazardous terrain. For 6 days, the team navigated without technological assistance, carrying the increasingly fragile young aliens while fighting the same toxic conditions that had incapacitated their caretakers. By the crisis's 7th day, when emergency support finally arrived from nearby systems, the galaxy witnessed humans at their most paradoxically enduring, not as conquerors who couldn't be stopped, but as guardians who refused to quit until everyone was safe. In the aftermath, as representatives gathered to assess the disaster's impact, J. Calavex addressed a subdued assembly. The Silthene philosopher's gaseous form pulsed with patterns that the translator interpreted as profound realization. "We misunderstood humanity's evolutionary adaptations," it stated. "We perceived their capacity to continue through conditions that would stop our species as inherently threatening, a weapon to be feared. We failed to recognize that persistence predation evolved not merely to run prey to exhaustion, but to provide for their social groups through sustained effort. What terrified us in warfare now humbles us in cooperation." The Vordarian High Crystalline, whose own offspring had been among those rescued, added, "Their endurance manifests not just in continuing when others stop, but in continuing for others when self-preservation would dictate retreat. This changes our understanding of their species fundamentally." Even the Morvic representatives, historically most aggressive toward humanity, acknowledged the shift in perception. Our species evolved specialized responses to specific challenges. Their delegate chittered. Humans evolved to persist through unknown challenges, to continue functioning when success parameters become unclear. This adaptation serves not just their survival, but potentially all sentient life. As rehabilitation efforts continued, Alina Reyes met with Kai Levinson, still recovering from radiation exposure sustained during his rescue operation. "You've shown them something we couldn't demonstrate through negotiations or warfare," she told the exhausted athlete. Levinson nodded weakly. "Endurance isn't just about not stopping. It's about what you choose not to stop doing. We evolved to keep going when things got hard, but that doesn't mean we evolved to keep fighting. Sometimes we evolved to keep helping." As the impromptu gathering of species concluded, a new understanding emerged, one that would reshape interstellar relations more profoundly than any treaty. The same evolutionary traits that had made humans feared now made them essential. The species that could continue when others failed became, paradoxically, the foundation for a more resilient shared future. The Galactic Crucible, intended as a celebration of biological diversity, had instead become a crucible in the truest sense, a trial by fire that revealed not just what each species could do, but who they truly were. 5 years after the Crucible Games had transformed humanity's relationship with the galactic community, Admiral Alina Reyes stood before a holographic display in the Conclave's central command chamber. Her silver hair and the fine lines around her eyes testified to decades of service, while the titanium implants in her spine maintained her characteristic straight-backed posture. "The probe data is unequivocal," she told the assembled representatives. "The swarm is artificial, self-replicating, and consumes all resources in its path. Standard containment protocols have failed in 3 systems already." The threat had emerged from beyond charted space 6 months earlier, a vast cloud of harvester drones that functioned as a coordinated entity. These mechanical predators required no rest, consumed minimal energy, and advanced relentlessly regardless of losses. Conventional military responses had proven ineffective against an enemy that simply continued its advance without biological limitations. The Vordarian high crystallines facets pulsed with agitation. "Our tactical models show 18 probable incursion vectors. Even with combined fleets, we cannot maintain defensive coverage across such a broad perimeter, especially given our species' rest requirements," added the Silthene overseer, its gaseous form swirling anxiously. "Continuous vigilance exceeds our biological capabilities." Alina studied the galactic map thoughtfully. "Perhaps that's why your conventional responses have failed. You're approaching this as a technological challenge when it's fundamentally a problem of endurance." The room fell silent as she outlined her proposal. The Eternal Watch Initiative would establish a defensive network utilizing each species' evolutionary specializations while addressing their biological limitations. The cornerstone would be human watchers providing the continuous vigilance that mechanical threats require. The concept was revolutionary: hybrid teams deploying across the galactic barrier, with humans serving as the constant element while specialized alien partners cycled through required rest periods. While Vordarians couldn't maintain continuous vigilance, their crystalline neural structures processed sensor data with unparalleled accuracy during active periods. Silthene couldn't function without molecular stability cycles, but their sensory capabilities detected anomalies no technology could match when fully cohesive. At the program's heart was the newly established Endurance Court, humans with exceptional stamina who trained alongside alien specialists. The selection process identified individuals whose prehistoric ancestors might have been the tribe's most successful persistence hunters, those who could maintain function despite sleep deprivation, physical discomfort, and psychological stress. Major Alejandro Diaz, one of the surviving Void Walkers, became the Corps' first commander. His body, still bearing scars from radiation exposure during that historic crossing, had somehow adapted to function with less sleep than even typical humans required. "We're not superior," he explained during recruitment briefings. We're just differently specialized. Every species has evolutionary adaptations. Ours happens to be continuing function when biological signals say stop. Dr. Sanjay Patel, now leading xenobiology research, developed protocols that maximized cross-species effectiveness. Human endurance isn't just physical, he explained to the first hybrid teams. It's cognitive persistence, maintaining decision-making capacity when fatigue should impair judgment. That's what makes us perfect complements to species with specialized but time-limited capabilities. Training exercises revealed unexpected symbiosis. When paired with Vordarians, humans managed continuous monitoring while their crystalline partners engaged in high-intensity analytical bursts between regenerative cycles. With Sylphine partners, humans maintained vigilance during molecular dispersion phases when the gaseous beings couldn't maintain cohesive consciousness. Most surprising was the effectiveness of human-Morvac pairs. The former enemies discovered profound complementarity. Morvac hive coordination provided tactical precision during active phases, while human endurance maintained vigilance during dormancy cycles. Neural links developed between partners, allowing shared consciousness that maximized both species' evolutionary advantages. The Watch deployed monitoring stations at 27 key points along the galactic barrier, each staffed by hybrid teams. For the first time, humanity's endurance became the foundation of interstellar security rather than a source of fear. The climactic moment arrived when the Harvester Swarm launched a coordinated attack on 7 different sectors simultaneously. For 5 straight days, human watchers coordinated defenses without sleep, making critical decisions while other species cycled through required rest periods. The turning point came through the neural link between veteran watchman Alejandro Diaz and his Vordarian partner Tal at monitoring station Epsilon. After 90 hours without rest, when Diaz should have been cognitively compromised beyond function, he recognized a pattern in the swarm's movement that had eluded conventional analysis. They're not just consuming resources, he realized. They're building something. A communication network that grows with each system they convert. Working through his neural link while Ketal underwent regeneration, Diaz identified the swarm's coordination protocols. When his partner reactivated their combined capabilities, human persistence paired with Vordarian gravitational manipulation, created a cascading trap that collapsed the swarm's communication network, reducing the mechanical threat from coordinated entity to disconnected components. In the aftermath, as the combined fleets neutralized the now fragmented swarm, the Conclave formally recognized Earth with a new designation. In a ceremony aboard the same station, where humans had first demonstrated their endurance years earlier, the Conclave bestowed the title of the Enduring Guardians, acknowledging humanity's unique contribution to galactic security. Elena, preparing to retire after a lifetime of service, shared a quiet moment with Jikala Vex, the Sylphine philosopher who had first recognized humanity's potential. The observation deck offered a panoramic view of the galactic spiral, stars glittering like scattered diamonds against the velvet void. "We feared you would be the death of us," the alien admitted through their translator, bioluminescent patterns showing a complex emotion. "Instead, you became the species that refuses to let the galaxy die." "We're still the same persistence predators you originally feared," Elena observed. "We haven't fundamentally changed." "No," the philosopher agreed, its gaseous form pulsing thoughtfully. "What changed was context. The same adaptation that makes a species dangerous when resources are scarce makes them essential when threats are constant. Your evolutionary path produced beings who continue when continuation seems impossible, who maintain function when all biological logic suggests surrender." Elena smiled at the ultimate irony. The very quality that had made humans feared now made them essential. The species that evolved to outlast its prey had found its true purpose, standing guard while the rest of the galaxy slept. As she gazed at the stars, Elena reflected on humanity's journey from feared outsiders to galactic guardians. Throughout human history, from prehistoric hunters tracking prey across endless savannas to modern watchers monitoring the void between stars, the central truth remained unchanged. Humans continued when continuation seemed impossible. They maintained function when biological signals demanded rest. They persisted beyond rational stopping points. This was why interstellar species had initially feared human endurance, not understanding that the same evolutionary adaptation that created relentless hunters also created tireless protectors. The capacity to ignore pain, to postpone sleep, to continue despite metabolic signals to stop. These traits made humans uniquely suited to stand eternal watch against threats that never rested. On monitoring Station Gamma, a newly graduated human watcher explained this paradox to her Morvek partner during their first deployment. As the insectoid being prepared to enter its required dormancy cycle, it chittered anxiously about leaving their sector unmonitored. Sleep, the human assured her partner with the calm confidence of a species that had evolved for precisely this role. I'll be here when you wake. I'll still be watching. That's what humans do. We endure. In the vastness of space, uncounted civilizations rested easier knowing that human watchers stood guard. The species once feared for their relentless persistence had transformed that evolutionary adaptation from weapon to shield. Humans remained the galaxy's persistence predators. But now they hunted threats rather than prey, their legendary endurance deployed in service of all sentient life. And so the ancient fear became profound respect, as interstellar species finally understood the true gift of human endurance, not the capacity to outlast enemies, but the commitment to outlast any challenge that threatened those under their protection. In the end, humanity's greatest contribution wasn't technology or military might, but simply the stubborn, irrational, magnificent refusal to stop when stopping would be easier, to continue when continuation seemed impossible, to endure.